Hi, everybody. I'm Ben Hundreds, co-founder of the Hundreds Apparel Company and co-founder of Family Style Food Festival. This is my very good friend, Jon Shook. You have a laundry list of accomplishments, I feel like. But from Animal Restaurant, Son of a Gun, Jon Vinny's, has one of the best catering companies in Los Angeles with Caramelized, does Cookbook Market. Yeah, this is Jon Shook, everybody. The great Jon Shook. I met Jon about 15 years ago. He first opened up Animal over on Fairfax. At that point, my partner and I had already had our business there for a handful of years. And Jon and I met in the back alley of Fairfax, causing trouble in our 20s. We used to have block parties over on Fairfax, and Jon and Vin used to help get us food for our block parties. Over the years, we've become good friends, and now through the food festival, he helps produce that event with us, and we work together on all different kinds of projects. It's great to have him here, so thanks, Jon.
Thank you.
Want to get right into it and chat a little bit about Jon Vinny's.
Jon Vinny's.
How long have you had the restaurant now for?
Jon Vinny's has been open for 7 years, the first location on Fairfax.
Yeah, and when you were opening up that restaurant, did you have a vision for the food, the vibe, the brand behind Jon Vinny's, or has that changed over time?
I would say that it was the first restaurant that we ever had that we did have a vision, a very clear vision on menu and on the design and the style, what we were after. So yeah, we did, but up until that point, we never did. We always kind of built restaurants and then figured out what the menu would be kind of post the kitchen being built. And,
sure.
You know, we would be figuring out the name kind of last minute, you know, what kind of service it was, plateware, etc. With Jon Vinny's, we really kind of flushed through all of it ahead of time before we started construction, which was the first time we've ever done that. And I would say it's highly recommended as you go into a business, probably to go with the forefront of knowing what it is that you want to do ahead of time.
Why? Because you had already opened a few restaurants by the time you opened up Jon Vinny's. Why this one did you come with this approach?
You know, in age, you get wiser and smarter. And, you know, I think as we have matured as restaurant operators, as we become older, I think our approach to every step of the business is, you know, more taken at a lens where you've had a lot of kind of past bad experiences. So going into it, you know, I think that we wanted to really kind of have a flushed out vision because of just past experience and knowing the struggles that you could
sure.
run into without having it really thought through. And, you know, it has evolved from where it started, you know, maybe with little wording on the menu or dishes, you know, based on customer demands. But in general, it still stayed pretty true to what the brand was when it started.
That's great. I was just going to ask if it has evolved, and you're saying that it has touches here and there, but...
Yeah, I mean, every great brand does got to continue to evolve. It can't sit still. It's hard to create stuff. It's easier to copy stuff. And I think that as society changes in people's eating habits and ordering habits, you have to evolve. Luckily, with Jon Vinny's, we were very early on with delivery. It was, you know, part of our thought process from the get-go. Very wise restaurateur told me that your restaurants always reflect where you're at in your life when you open them. And Jon Vinny's, you know, both Vinny and me were young parents. And, you know, we wanted a place where it was kid-friendly, but we also wanted a place where if we liked it, we could just go get it and bring it home. And up until that point, it wasn't really a focus. And it was kind of simultaneously, you know, that all these apps were coming out with delivery. And as we started to weigh out the cost between having our own drivers versus using a platform, the platform made the most sense for us. We actually started with Caviar and then moved to DoorDash, and then DoorDash bought Caviar, so now we're on both.
I think that one thing that people really want to learn here is about growing a brand and how you've grown Jon Vinny's over the years. What are some of the biggest factors when you're deciding where you want to put a new restaurant and, you know, why you're doing it?
So I think it starts at the very beginning. Animal, when we opened Animal, we knew there would never be another Animal. You know, Son of a Gun, we had that same kind of mentality going into it. And I think that with Jon and Vinny's, we knew from the get-go that like, if it worked, we wanted to try to replicate it, and not just try to replicate it with the same menu, but with the same design, the same aesthetic, the same menu, the same kitchen line, so that was kind of a thought process very early on. As far as picking locations, a lot of it's deal-based. Number one thing is really the gut check. If Vinny and me both have to agree, and that's kind of how it works. Is like, and usually before you even walk into a space, you just like pull up, you just get these like weird like tingly feelings that in your mind you think it's going to work, and that's where the start of it has to connect with. As far as growth, we have 4 places. We just opened a new one last week in Beverly Hills. Beverly Hills is a very expensive place to operate in, and kind of one of our last thought process, but during the pandemic, a great opportunity came to us for that location, and it made sense, and I think that that's part of it, is like, it made sense. The other thing is like bookended by 2 brands that are very successful in the city of Beverly Hills. So it made sense for that. With South LA, it was our main catering facilities there. We got a call about the space. We went over there, and it just felt like too good to be true. A freestanding building with a parking lot, which is a rare thing in LA. So we kind of fell in love with the building, and then fell in love with the neighborhood. There's another little trick that we also look for is karma's key, right? And like any location that's had a restaurant there for say 20 or 30 years prior to you taking the space usually has good juju, right? So it's like, luckily most of our places, like in San Vicente, in Brentwood, it's like, it was early world diner, and all the people that were locals knew it. So you could be like, where are you going? We're going into early world location, or Yee's Chinese is where we're at in South LA. Obviously Damiano's on Fairfax was kind of legendary pizza place for the city prior to us taking it over. In Beverly Hills, it was an optical store, so it wasn't an eyeglass. It was an eyeglass store, so you couldn't use that method for all of them. But 3 of the 4 are that, and the one that we're working in Studio City also has that as well. It was a Dairy Queen, for like 30 years, and then it's kind of turned over a bunch of times. But I think it's turned over because it hasn't been properly updated, the building, and I think that there's also something to be said about that as well. Is that a location could be a great location, but if it hasn't evolved with the times, then it needs to get there, and who's going to bring it there? And I think that it's more risky as an operator to try to like extend yourself and bring that time and energy to a location that might have been struggling for many years. But we like the neighborhood, and we know the neighborhood. We have a lot of friends that live in the neighborhood. We love to ask people, like we had a space recently come to us that was in New York City, and like New York City is like one of the last places I think that we're looking to open, but the deal was very sweet, right? They were going to build the entire thing, 0 financial risk. But then when you started speaking to the locals, you're like, yo, what do you think about this location? They would be like, I would never go down there. And you're like, well, there's your answer, right? And that's where the deal is too good to be true, is probably there's a reason.
I know, well, I don't know, but I've seen you open up restaurants, and I've had a lot of friends open up restaurants, and opening a new restaurant can be really hard. Through your experience, what are some of the issues and pitfalls you've had over the years, and how have you worked through them?
Yeah. Well, we could have a whole nother full day panel on all the pitfalls that happen when you open a restaurant. But with the Jon Vinny's brand, we've really gotten very detailed with our documentation. And, every time we open a spot, you learn from it. And I like to, look back to the mistakes that we made from unit 1 to now unit 4. And it's like, we still made mistakes in unit 4, right? And like, that's part of being an operator, is being able to recognize your mistakes, notice them, and then try to fix them. Yeah. And like, when you make one adjustment, usually it triggers something else that you might not have realized you were going to trigger when you made one adjustment, And the other thing is like, it's so hard. You're looking at something on a piece of paper, and in your mind, you're envisioning the little movements that got to be made by the cooks and by the team. And, you think you fix something, and then you get into the actual finished product. And you're like, oh shit, I can't believe we did that. I mean, with this 4th location, we moved the ice cream machine, an ice cream machine sits on top of a freezer. Part of the reason why we moved the ice cream machine is because we figured a lot of people would go to Go Greek right next door, right? And we have seen that impact our ice cream sales so far a weekend, so it's a little hard to really tell. But what we didn't think about is when we moved the ice cream machine, it sits on top of a freezer. And the freezer holds our raviolis, right? So now we are basically running raviolis from one side of the building to the other side of the building, at least for the next week or two until we get a new freezer. Because now we have to figure out how to put a freezer into the line that wasn't already designed. And that little mistake impacts us, especially with, a restaurant that's so driven by to-go and being able to pump out to-go food. It's like adding another 30 seconds or a minute to going to get the raviolis could really impact our ticket times.
I mean, I was there last week, the first night you guys were doing takeout, and you made an adjustment that night.
Yeah.
I mean, you and Vin were talking to me about how we're going to open every restaurant with to-go first.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, up until that point, it was kind of like the perfect storm. We hadn't got our beer and wine license, wasn't activated. Our team had been working on it since January, and it's October, and we're, calling ABC every day, so much to the point that they told us to stop calling because we were annoying. We were like, what are we going to do? We have our staff here. We don't want to push it off. And we said, let's just go with takeout. And kind of as it started to happen, we started realizing this is the perfect storm because we never practiced takeout. Takeout was just kind of like, you just did it on the side. And here we had a full weekend of just practicing takeout, which was a great learning lesson and something that I would say we will always do moving forward. Gave the cooks real opportunity to be cooking. Obviously we have our opening style that we like to do, but this put them really in the spot. And what was nice is that we could turn the tablet off. So if we were feeling behind or underwater, we would just shut off the tablet, give ourselves a minute, adjust, maybe even shut it off for an hour and just go and be like, hey, let's just fire some pizzas because we're having issues with them coming out. So it allowed us to work through a lot of things that we hadn't been able to work through in the past. And it's something that moving forward, we'll make that part of our opening strategy, is doing, 2 or 3 days of just takeout.
So the Jon and Vinny's experience is something that you guys now have been working on for 7 years. It was, you thought about the brand, menu, vibe, everything, and you've been working on it over years. And now that you're expanding, you have 4 restaurants, you said you're working on one in the Valley. I know you're looking at another city to open up some Jon and Vinny's. How do you preserve that Jon and Vinny's experience when you're hiring all new teams in different cities and in new areas that, might not be so familiar with the brand?
Part of the reason we are growing is because we have a great team. And to be able to provide opportunity for that team, you have to grow. Because if you don't, they're going to kind of cap out, right? So as we're making decisions, we're making decisions based on our team. And, obviously our senior management team is great. A lot of people have been 5-10 years with the company. So even some of them have been there pre-Jon and Vinny's and have been moved into Jon and Vinny's to focus on. I know you brought up the other city. It's Miami. Which we're very excited about. Vinny and me are from there. We have family there, but that's not why we're going. We're going because a great team member who was one of our senior people came to us and said, my wife had this opportunity in Florida. Would you guys ever have any desire to open in Florida? And we said, let's give it a sniff test. And, we kind of started sniffing around the city, kind of seeing what opportunities, are we coming into a city that already has a lot of the style food and the style design, or does it feel like we could make a mark? It felt like we could, and we have secured two locations currently right now, and we're excited. But it's all really being driven by Damien, who's already down there, moved down in January, and we'll kind of baby step. We'll start with one, and if it works, then we'll quickly follow with the second. So
great. And when you're moving to somewhere like Miami, I know it's not open yet, You have such a big presence here in LA, and I feel like everyone knows what Jon and Vinny's is here in Los Angeles. But you're going to Miami, where maybe not everybody knows what Jon and Vinny's is.
Yeah.
Do you have a plan, or do you guys have an idea? Or have you thought about?
Well, we're going to be dependent on DoorDash. So hopefully they step up to the plate and really hit hard with the marketing. No, that's not 100%.
Yeah. How are you going to let people know about Jon and Vinny's in Miami?
I mean, I think that obviously with Instagram, most Instagram followers aren't local. So there's a start there. We've already have a good foundation in South Florida, coming from culinary school down there, working for chefs down there. We have former cooks that have left the company and have went to South Florida and have opened down in South Florida. So we have presence through them as well. So I think, our internal conversation is like going down there and trying to use the foundation that we have from the past in South Florida to try to promote, whether it's family and friends, DoorDash, which is obviously going to come with us down there. I know they're making a big push into South Florida as well. And we've already talked to them about this, just kind of, trying to rely on good service and good food. And I think that at the end of the day, no matter how much marketing dollars you spend or how much outreach you do, really at the end of the day, you have to prove yourself on the plate and in the service, right? And I think we will bring a handful of people from LA that will move down there, besides Damien, and as well bring a bunch of people from LA to come and help us open and really kind of put our restaurant culture into that organization in that location.
Having a brand, it's not just the restaurant, right? A strong brand has all kinds of touch points. Social media, for you, delivery is a big part. That's how a lot of people experience the brand. Are those things that you guys, your management, you guys talk about and, you try to grow and be better at, or, and include that in the brand vision?
Yeah, it's 100%. I mean, Brienne, who's actually right over there, she has a small team of people that she leads, that handle social media, outreach, everything that you just addressed on your note card. She kind of runs with her team. We're always looking at ways to, get our name in front of people organically or naturally, even down to the bag, right? Like when we opened up, we were like, we want the branding of the bag to be so big that when you see it on the counter, we're there, right? And I think one thing that you didn't ask is, I would say in the last maybe 15 years, there's been a culture switch, because it used to be the chef was the brand, right? The chef was the face of the restaurant. And what's funny is that we named it Jon and Vinny's kind of jokingly, but you don't really see our face attached to the brand. And that's something that we work really hard on, is to make sure that the brand's identity is the logo, the color, the pizza box, the stickers, the Instagram. And when you go on Instagram, it's not pictures of Vinny and me, it's pictures of the food, right? Because that's a key part. And I would say in the last 3 or 4 years, a lot of our focus has moved away from the food's still important, don't get me wrong, but forever we were always a company that it was 90% food, 10% service. And now we're a company that we're 51% service, 49% food. So the service is really the key, right? Whether it's ordering on an app or coming in as a customer, right? It's how's the customer experience, how's the customer service, then how's that tie back to the brand? Because if the brand service sucks, then why are you gonna wanna support the brand? So that's a lot of how we look at it and how we talk about it internally. And Vinny and me are both creatives, and like as you kind of see Jon and Vinny, they have the same design. So it's like, where's our creative juices go? And I think it goes to execution of service and food, and then the other brand stuff that you're talking about, the merch, the branding, the packaging, this stuff. How do we improve that? How do we make that a better customer experience? Because without customers, you're nothing.
So moving into that, one last little topic before we take a couple of questions is collaborations. And I'm curious to know what you think collaborations do for you and your restaurants. And for me, collaborations is working with another brand, and I know it has been for you. You've worked with Off-White, you've worked with Vans, you just worked with Dickies for the food festival, but also, you've done collaborations with chefs and restaurateurs. I remember the Animal 10-year anniversary. It was like a year-long party with bringing in different chefs and restaurants and collaborating with them at Animal. Can you just tell us a little bit about why collaborations in general are important to marketing for your brand and how it works for you guys?
Yeah, with the animal collaborations or chef-driven collaborations, typically more than merchandise. I think that for that brand or for that restaurant, I should say, it's not really a brand; it's more of a restaurant.
You've done also chefs and things at chefs and restaurants at Jon and Vinny's also, wasn't it?
We have, but usually we'll just do like a dish or two when we do a chef collab at Jon and Vinny's.
Yeah.
Because the customer base want to have their little gnats or their spicy fusilli. So it's like we've learned that like if we rid or stop that from happening, that we actually are hurting ourselves. So usually with Jon and Vinny's, we're looking for collaborations that are like-minded, like, Lexus, who's been a long time collaborator with us and partner of ours. It's like they have a lot of like-minded attributes and thoughts and approaches to the way that they approach their brand that align with our brand. So it makes sense. Something like Off-White, it's somebody who we admire. We think what he's doing in his field, Virgil, who's unfortunately no longer with us, but what he was doing at the time was so innovative and creative, and it inspired us. So it's like when the opportunity came to do a collaboration, it was like, absolutely. With something like Vans, it was a rare opportunity that came to us. And, growing up wearing Vans as a kid and dreaming about being a pro surfer or pro skateboarder, right? Growing up in Florida, that leaving that meeting, it was like, felt like this rare opportunity. Like as a cook, I've been able now to do a shoe, and so we look at opportunities, how we think it will help that brand, how it will help our brand, how does it work together, and that's how we approach it. So, all because it doesn't need to be a big name. We did a great collaboration with Neighbors, right? Local streetwear brand down in South LA. We were coming into the neighborhood, it felt like really the right fit, almost like they were ushering us into their neighborhood, right? And it wasn't maybe our biggest splash as far as attention, like the way when we did our guest collaboration, right? It's like, so you kind of pick and choose. And I think at the end of the day, the number one thing about our business, which a lot of people don't realize, is Vinny and me both have to agree, right? And I think that that's always been our approach. It's like, if we don't both agree, then it doesn't happen. One of us could like it, the other one might not. And if one person doesn't, it's out. There could be some heavy debates about, why or why not, and I think that that's, has led us to where we are at now, is that I have someone in my corner who I truly trust. And he's been there, good, bad, and ugly. And, we've had great experiences. We came up together and, I lean on him for a lot of information. He leans on me. But at the end of the day, if we don't both agree, then it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I have a business partner I feel the same exact way about. So I know how it works.
Yeah, I don't call Vinny my business partner. I call him my brother.
We have time for a couple questions if anybody has.
You spoke about as scaling the business is kind of necessary in order to create opportunity for the team as you're growing. How do you make those decisions, whether to be a company that promotes from within solely, or do you mix that with bringing outside expertise in order to help you scale in a better way?
That's a great question. And I think we're in an interesting crosshair as well, because as you grow, sometimes you do need to go to the outside to be able to get information or direction in an area that maybe you're not 100% familiar with. And you might not have somebody within your organization that understands or knows how to do that. But there's also a lot of opportunity growth from within, and I think you have to weigh out those challenges. Like, for example, our person who's doing HR, right? It's like we put her through an HR training course, took 2 years. We invested the time, the money. To us, it was really important to have somebody that understood the organization, manage HR on a full-time basis, then going and hiring an HR person from outside and bringing them in, because they wouldn't know the culture. And it was easier to teach up the rules and pay for the additional support from outside services, whether it's HR, labor lawyers or HR consultants, than to bring somebody in from outside for that position. We recently have a maintenance person, right? It's like he goes around to fix the leaky toilets and caulking around the sinks and, broken refrigerators. And for that, it's like we had great handymen around, but like we needed somebody that had an experience in managing and operations of maintenance in the restaurant. So we went to the outside. So you got to kind of look and see what it is. Our director of operations started as son of a gun as a bartender, came to us with a great pedigree ahead of time. And now as a director of operations just for Jon Vinny's as of January. She had a crazy path to get there. For her, it's like she kind of hit the ceiling financially where she could have gone with what she was doing. So we came to her with the job. And there's a learning curve, right? There's a learning curve on how that is going to be. And I think that you have to weigh that out as an operator. Is like, do you want to go through the learning curve, or do you want to bring somebody in who's going to put you through a learning curve?
Hey, Jon. Knowing your background and your partner's background as chefs, it was surprising to hear the focus 50% on the service experience. When and how did that evolve for you guys?
Yeah, well, Brad, a lot of people don't know how far back we go, but Brad and me go back all the way to Chadwick.
Chadwick, maybe.
And, which is a long time ago. It's no longer around, but it was Ben Ford, Govan Armstrong. Our first job here in LA, in the kitchen. Andrew was our boss. Remember how much he would yell at us all? That was back when you could yell at people in the restaurants. I would say that we evolved as diners, right? And we started realizing there's probably, I don't even know how many, but it's like 20,000 restaurants in greater LA, right? That you have to appeal to the customer. And I think we started to realize as customers, the little touches of a thank you or hello, how important it became to us when we would go out to eat and why we would pick to go back to a restaurant. In starting to read more about service, started to really kind of open our eyes up to, hey, I know we're from the kitchen. I know that's been always kind of been our thought process, because our thought process from the beginning was everything could suck as long as the food was good, they'll come back. But what's happened is evolution of cooks and chefs in this city, in this country, the opening of the internet, which, back then when we were working at Chadwick, there was no internet. I faxed my resume. You could learn how to cook online very easily, right? But you can't learn customer service online very easily. And that's not something that's easy to teach either. And as we started to kind of notice and recognize how important it was for us as a customer, we started to really focus on it as restaurant owners. It's really important for us to not drop the ball on the customer experience, because you could have an off night as a cook, right? Those that cook in here could tell you, it's like, you go into work, it's like, man, some days it's just not connecting. And you could go online and read reviews, but you could come in and have a pizza that maybe isn't cooked all the way. But if your customer experience on how it was handled is above, you're going to give it another chance. And I think that that's what we started to realize, is that the customer experience as on the service side was almost more important. That's why we're 51-49, right? We didn't go from where we were at 90-10 to flipping it 100% on its head. The food is still very important to us, but the customer experience, the customer service is overshadowed it. And I would say coming out of the pandemic, that was one of the hardest things, right? Is that you came out of the pandemic, Most of your front of the house staff was no longer part of the team. And now you have customers coming back in expecting the same level of customer service or customer experience. And that's when we really realized how important it was to have great overall customer service to the level of the food that we're putting out. Hillstone would be proud of us. Hillstone would be proud of us, which I admire. And I've always been a big fan, Yeah, I could tell you, talk about a brand that's been able to grow through the entire country, still stay independent as owners, and be able to put out the level of experience that they do, whether you're here, Miami, Aspen, is something that I think we should all strive to do. And in order to do that, they put a lot on paper, and I think that the biggest thing that we've learned, it's like when we opened Animal, we had our employee handbook. What was that, right? Ordering sheet, inventories, who knew, right? Now it's like our handbook's 150 plus pages. It details out so many little things, and we hold our managers to hold their team accountable to those guidelines. Our steps of service, our steps of service in our restaurant, which, in the last, I would say, 4 years has come such a forefront of our conversation. It's like, whether you're on Fairfax or you're on Slauson or any of the locations, it's like, what's the steps of service? And I think that the more we started to mature as individuals, we started to realize how important it was to have things in black and white, and Hillstone is a master at that, and I think that there's something that we can all learn from their operations.
I just wanted to know more about your relationship with Vinny, and how are you able to continue to make sure both of you guys are growing the business, but both having a growth mindset to produce the same ideas you want. And obviously working with a partner, there can be disagreements, and you touched on that, but I'm very curious what it's like to make sure you guys are growing together and not growing apart.
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting question, and I like to, start with saying, Tom Brady, Giselle, perfect couple, at least on paper, star quarterback, gorgeous model, right? They couldn't make it work. Relationships are hard, right? And anybody that will, tell you that a relationship is easy, they're lying, right? I would say that Vinny and me, we've gone through our ups and downs. When we were younger, we would throw blows, literally fist fight. And I think now as we've grown as adults, there's not the time to fight like that. And I think we have to trust in each other. And that's the number one most important thing, is that you have to trust in whoever your partners are, right? And I think that during COVID, you got to see a lot of people's real colors personally and professionally. And I think that, Vinny was there the entire time for me, and I was there for him, and the good and the bad. And, I think now our relationship, we're like an old married couple, where it's like you kind of get to reflect back on these times and enjoy them, right? It's like we've done more than what we ever anticipated. Whatever we stepped out to do, we've gone way beyond that, and I think that we understand that. When I say we, I'm saying Vinny and me. And, I think that we enjoy that, and now we're like, we could sit down and have conversations, tough conversations, financial conversations, employee conversations, growth conversations, and not get into a fist fight, because we have that foundation that's been built. But when you're starting out, it's really difficult, and you got to have give and take. And I've spoken with friends that have partners, and, the challenge never becomes easy. It never does, and I think that Tom and Giselle are the perfect reason to sum this up, is that star quarterback, gorgeous model, they couldn't make it work, then, it just shows how difficult it is. But right now, we're in a great situation, Vinny and me. We have a lot of love for one another, and, if it ended tomorrow, we would still have a lot of love for each other.
How you able to seamlessly transition between street style, like a hero, and cuisine, and make those things feel the same, even though they're two different things?
Thank you for saying that it looked seamless, because from our side, it definitely didn't feel that way. But I think that when we approach family style, we approach it with the only way I guess we know how. It just like, we wanted it to be us, and we wanted family style to be a reflection of us. You know, we've had the brand now for almost 20 years, and Bobby and I have always had, you know, same vision for the company. And when we wanted to do family style, it was just an extension of what we wanted for the hundreds. And the vision and the art and the story behind family style is just, it continues on of what we've been doing for so many years. I hate using the word authentic and being authentic to ourselves, but at the end of the day, it's what we were. Like, it's just what Bobby and I like, what our other partner Miles, what he liked, and you know, just keeping the through line from the hundreds to family style, and just making sure that we were happy with it, we were comfortable with it, we weren't reaching further than we can. And I think that we also had a lot of great help in putting the festival together and what we wanted the vision for it to be. You know, talking with other restaurateurs and people that we want in it, from Jon and Vin to Victor to Bert and many others helped along the way. So I feel that really it was us being true to ourselves and putting on an event and a festival that we wanted to be at. And if you are a fan of the hundreds, you would come to the festival and say, yeah, this makes sense. I was told no more questions.